Fundamental attribution error or correspondence bias, we put too much weight in dispositional factors when we explain other people's behavior, and we undervalue the importance of the situation. So let me tell you about a couple of examples, some experimental, some not, suggesting that fundamental attribution error does exist and is somewhat ubiquitous. One study used video footage of the Milgram study of obedience. So subjects watched the video of an obedient subject, and they were asked whether they would obey in the same situation. Only 10% of the subjects watching the video said that they would obey in the same situation as the one they witnessed in the video. Now, of course, we know 65% of people obeyed in the actual experiment. And one way of interpreting this pattern of findings is that when people watch the video, they think, oh, that's just a very obedient person. And I'm not an obedient person, so I wouldn't do it. But that person I see in the video acting obediently must truly be obedient. And what you're doing there is you're putting the responsibility for the behavior that you see on the person, on the kind of person they are, and you're ignoring the situational factors. And as we know, there were very, very strong situational factors that increased obedience in the Milgram paradigm. So ignoring the situation and focusing too much on the kind of person they are. One sort of real-world example of this is our tendency when people play popular characters on TV or in the movies, on shows that go on for a long time, or movies that are popular, we have a hard time separating the actor from the character. And the fact is that these people get paid. They're actors. They're getting paid a lot of money to be like this character. But of course, the character somebody plays that they're getting paid for should, by rights, not tell us any information at all about what they're like as a person. And yet we think that even if we rationalize it by saying, well, they couldn't portray that character so very well unless they were really a little bit like that. But that's not true. That's just being a good actor. So in fact, the way somebody acts a character has nothing to do with the kind of person they are. And yet, we believe that. And just one example, but there are sort of lots of them out there. Leonard Nimoy actually wrote an autobiography called I Am Not Spock. Because everybody thinks that he's Spock. He's just a good actor. He had a part that was very memorable. So what kind of person an actor portrays doesn't tell us anything about them, and yet we are subject to the fundamental attribution error. We don't think, oh, getting paid a lot of money. We think, oh, that person's really like that. One more empirical piece of evidence for the fundamental attribution error. A lot of research in this area use what are called counter-attitudinal essays. What does that mean? A counter-attitudinal essay is an essay that you are asked to write in an experiment under some condition in which, or somebody's asked to write, that goes against their attitude. So this was sort of a popular paradigm that was used, and here's one sort of example, similar to a counter-attitudinal essay. Subjects come to the lab. This was done in the relatively early days of the Castro regime in Cuba, and it was at a time when there were very passionate opinions among American college students about the situation going on in Cuba. Subjects come to the lab and are exposed to an essay that they believe was written by somebody named Fred. They think is another subject, but was actually a Confederate. And the essay is either an anti-Castro essay or a pro-Castro essay. And in some versions of the study, they watch a video of Fred reading it aloud, and other ones they read a written version. And you'll see that the overhead I show you doesn't perfectly match the design I'm going to tell you about, because there are lots of iterations of this kind of study, but you'll see the main idea in the results. The essay you read from Fred or the video you see of him is always the same, regardless of what condition you're in. So the content of the pro-Castro or anti-Castro essay is always the same regardless of condition. The independent variable here is, what do you think is the situation under which Fred wrote the essay? Between subject design, there is this one independent variable, 5 conditions. If you randomly assign to the first condition, you believe that Fred wrote the essay of his own free will. That he was given free choice. You can write a pro-Castro essay, you can write an anti-Castro essay, do whatever you want, and what you see that Fred put together was his own free choice, whether it was pro or con. Randomly assigned to the second condition, you're told that Fred had no choice in terms of whether to write a pro or anti-Castro essay. He was assigned to do one or the other. So he was not given the choice. Third condition, you're told that Fred was given arguments by the experimenter to include in his essay. So not only did he not choose his position, he was provided with an argument based by the experimenter. Randomly assigned to the fourth condition, you're told that Fred copied an essay given to him by the experimenter. So he didn't write it at all. He just simply copied over something that somebody else had written. And finally, in the fifth condition, you're told that Fred just reads aloud an essay written by somebody else. So he didn't even put pen to paper. In this case, you see him read it, and he just is reading aloud something written by somebody else. Now, really, despite the fact that there are 5 conditions here, in a sense there are only 2 conditions. One is, did Fred choose his position in the essay, or in these 4 conditions, he didn't choose? So what's critical to notice before we go to the results is what the manipulation is telling us is only in this condition do we have any idea at all of what Fred thinks about Cuba and the Castro regime. In all 4 of these conditions, Fred did not choose the topic, he did not provide the arguments, so we really genuinely have no data about what he thinks about Cuba or Castro. Because he didn't choose what to say, and they're not even, in some cases, his own words. The dependent variable in the study is, okay, you've read or seen this statement from Fred about Castro and Cuba. What do you think Fred really thinks about Castro? Again, in the conditions where he had no choice, we, logically speaking, have no idea what he thinks. We have no basis to make a judgment about what Fred thinks about Castro and Cuba. But here are the results. On the left, we have the condition where Fred has chosen his position. In that case, it should be, seriously, after I've already called somebody else out for texting. After, in the case where the student, Fred has chosen his position, so we do have some indication of what we think, of what Fred actually thinks. Red bar is when we've read a pro-Castro speech by Fred. Blue bar is when it's an anti-Castro speech. Higher scores indicate a more positive attitude towards Castro. So in the case where the student chooses a position, totally logical pattern of findings, more positive among when you've read a pro-Castro speech, less positive if it's anti-Castro. So that's